So basically, I have this theory where I think that the speed of time is directly proportional to its length. Hello, and welcome back to the Save Ourselves podcast. I am your host Aparna, and this is episode 5. Well, first of all, if you're new to the podcast, hello and welcome. Here we talk about a lot of different things, and in the 4 episodes that we've done, we have talked about looking back at our past selves, and we've talked about routines, and we've also done like a trailer episode on what the podcast is about, and a lot of these different things. And there are so many different topics still left to explore. So that's my intent with this podcast, of like having an outlet for all the things that go on in my brain, and hopefully you find them enjoyable as well and you take away something interesting from the podcast. The podcast is basically meant to be like a weekly catch up with your friend, where it's very like low key, and you simply hang out, grab a drink, grab some snacks, and just catch up about life in general. And you know how those conversations go from like catching about like life updates and just talking about the things going on in your life, and then they lead on to more of like deeper topics where you share something from your own life, you become vulnerable, or sometimes it's even just like goes off into like an intelligent space where you are just navigating a few topics, or you're simply wondering, you're coming up with theories and just going into the depths of topics that you wouldn't have even thought about before. And it's just that direction a conversation takes organically. And I think that is my intention with the podcast. Like, while I have the topic in mind, it's very broad and it's been sort of brewing in my brain up until I hit the record button and I sit down to talk about it. But I don't usually come up with like a very detailed script or a set of pointers. I'll maybe just jot down a few like major topics that I want to cover. But especially with this topic, like for today's episode, I have absolutely nothing planned. I just had an hour before I had to go to dinner, and I was like, this is the perfect time to record this because I have been thinking about this topic for such a long time. I need an outlet for these thoughts, and hopefully some of you will also find it interesting. So this is episode 5, and the topic that I have in mind is timeflation. So basically, I have this theory where I think that the speed of time is directly proportional to its length. So sort of, it's like, you know, when you see someone after a long time and you're like, oh my god, I can't even believe it's been a year or it's been so many months. Or when the calendar turns and you're like, oh my god, it's a new month, where did the past month like go? It like flew by, and half the year is already over, and things like that. And I think these are some like very common phrases that all of us use, and it's like right there in our like day-to-day vocabulary. We see a lot of it on social media. Like, we are almost like complaining about how fast the time is going, and more than even complaining, I think we're just wondering where the time went. And we see this in like all age groups. You see older people like literally wondering where the time went, and you know, they will be nostalgic and they'll remember a few things and they'll just reminisce and think about their olden days. And like, here we are at this age, like I'm in my 20s, and I feel time just sort of going by faster and faster. And I think that's how I came up with this theory. Of course, it's not like based on anything other than my own experience and the experience of the people I see around me. I feel like the perception of the speed of time is directly proportional to its length. And that's what I want to sort of unravel in this podcast. And like I said, I don't have a set direction. I don't even know where I'll end up at the end of the episode in terms of what mindset I am in about this. Hopefully it's a positive one and we go off on like a very good note. But I just want to sort of like ramble on and see where this episode takes us. So feel free to grab a drink or grab a snack, just sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. So before I start off, I do want to sort of give a disclaimer that I'll be, generalizing a lot of things here, saying like, we do this, we do that. And I know that experiences are very individualized and nuanced, but at the same time, generations, sort of experience a lot of things together as like a community, and we all have these shared experiences as well. And I'm not trying to discount any sort of, nuances in these experiences, and I know that your like circumstances play a huge role in how you sort of experience these things and feel these things. And yeah, my intention is not at all to discount any of those experiences or even to sort of overgeneralize things. But for the sake of this discussion and for this podcast, I think I am going to be referring to my experiences as like a collective experience, because even though it's something that I have personally been through, I know that a lot of people in my community, or people I've spoken to, interacted with, or seen maybe on the internet, or even like social media content that I consume on a daily basis, speaks to these experiences and sort of validates it. So I know there are some aspects where you get that sort of a communal angle and this sort of a collective experience. So take it with a grain of salt, and I hope that I am doing justice when I call it a collective experiences. And like I said, it's just for the sake of this podcast. It's not to be taken like as a fact or a general rule. So with that, I think let's go back in time to where the concept of time started for me personally. So now that I'm in like my mid 20s, I think when I was a kid, the concept of time was more leisurely, time went by at a leisurely pace, and sometimes even like ridiculously slower. And now that I think about it, I think it's because we are like physically, emotionally, like mentally so small. Like everything around us feels so big in terms of like the physical space around us. Like everything is like taller, bigger, wider from like where we stand, because we're actually like physically so little. And I think that also translates into our experiences, because we're surrounded with people who are mostly, older, or like we function in like a world of adults where everyone sort of knows what they're doing, or at least it seems like that. And so for them, it feels like have it all figured out, and we are like navigating through this vastness that we have so much left, and like so much of life left, with like so many milestones left and all of that. And even though we may not even be aware of this fact that we're just like maybe 5 or 6, and we have like our whole lives ahead of us and there's so much to do, I think somewhere without even the rational knowledge of it, we feel that as a kid. And the vastness translates into the speed of time as well. So time feels like much slower, and we're like, when will the school day be over, and when will this day end, and time is going by so slowly, and things like that. And again, of course, there are certain things like time, obviously apart from scientifically going at a certain like fixed rate, it also changes as per like, it also has a perceptive element to it, where time goes by faster when we're doing something we enjoy, or we're in like a focused flow state, and it will go like ridiculously slow when we're doing something we don't enjoy, or we're waiting for someone, or just we're not like feeling good about the way we're spending our time in that moment. So I think there are these things as well, but overall I think as a kid, time like tends to be slow, because we're like I think involved in a lot of activities that are not necessarily chosen by ourselves, and it's like an obligation, or like some like things that we're supposed to do. Like the adults have told us that school is something that you have to do, you have to go to these like sports things and classes and extracurriculars and all of that. And whether or not it's enjoyable or not, I think it's sort of like a thing that you're supposed to do because like you're told to do it. And maybe because of that overall, and because of like I said, the being small element, I think time tends to go pretty slow overall, like when you're a child. And you also hear children like saying things like I can't wait to grow up, and I can't wait to be an adult. And I think it also comes off from this sense of like impatience of like, why is time so ridiculously slow right now, and I want it to go fast. I want that sort of, autonomy, independence, and I want to be able to do things my own way. So I think it also comes from that. Yeah, I think I'm just going to take like a brief pause to check if my camera is still rolling, because I'm not even sure how much battery is left in my microphone. So let me just like hit pause, come back, and we can continue this conversation in, let's say, our teenage to early adult years. Alright, yeah, we're still good to go. So let's keep rolling. Okay, first of all, when I stopped rolling, I realized that the podcast did actually go into a completely, like, it completely went into uncharted waters where I hadn't even thought about all of these things. And I'm like actually thinking out loud on the podcast. So, purely like as a selfish motive, I think it's great for me to just like sit down and record my own thoughts and like talk to a camera. Even like there's no one listening right now as I'm recording. Like, I think even like the experience of uploading and someone viewing it is very sort of cut in time into two halves, where like in the first half it's just me staring into a camera, and there's the light that you see behind is actually sort of blinding me from the right side, but it's just me in the setup, and I'm holding my mic on like a chopstick to hopefully get a good audio in place. And yeah, it's a completely like solitary experience. And then when you are viewing it, it's like the other half stitched onto the first half, where you feel like I am talking to you, but actually I have not been talking to you at all. I've just been staring into a camera. So I feel like just rambling like this to me is also like a very curious experience. And yeah, the main point was that I think just rambling on to like a camera is also like a good way to let out my thoughts. It's like an audiovisual form of journaling, to be honest, because I'm trying to sort of, explore all of these different outlets. Like I do journal regularly. I have been journaling for a long time, and it's also great to like explore other forms, because I know that now that I'm so accustomed to journaling, my mind is sort of used to the way that my like pen will touch the paper and my thoughts will flow in like a certain rhythm. And now this, when I'm talking to you, like talking to the camera, it's like a completely different wavelength, it's a completely different rhythm. And I think that's why my thoughts are able to like, go into these undiscovered like terrains and go off in directions that I haven't even like thought of previously. And now that I'm actively thinking about the said topic, like about timeflation, I think there are these like concepts that maybe were existed in like bits and pieces in my mind, but they're all just like stringing together as I'm talking like in real time. So yeah, I think that's like a nice realization for me to have. Okay, so after this brief intermission where I obviously rambled on into like completely different directions, let's get on track and talk about how we experience time in like the teenage phase or like the early adult years. I think like when you come into like transition from being like a kid to an adolescent to teenager, I think it's a very different experience, and it's also like portrayed in movies and a lot of different media that we consume, that teenage is like one of the most uncertain periods of your life, and there are so many things that are new to you and you're going through so many changes. And like in my personal experience, teenage has not been like the most uncertain time. Like I think my adulthood has been like one of the most uncertain times in my life. But I think teenage is like the first hit of that, like where you get the first wave of uncertainty and you're sort of like coming out of that shell that you had when you were a kid. And I think that shell is not even like a bad thing. It was that bubble of of your dreams, your lack of insecurities. Like you were just so easygoing. It was great in childhood mostly, and then now that you're into teenage, you suddenly have a lot of these changes to deal with. Like your body is changing, your circumstances are changing, and although there's like you're still a kid, you're in that awkward phase where people treat you like an adult sometimes, and sometimes they treat you like you're younger than you actually are. So I think in that case, time is like a very confusing state to like very confusing concept to like wrap your brain around. I think a lot of us have these conversations with our like the adults in our life during these phases, where we will experience being treated as like an older version of ourselves in certain circumstances, and in other cases will be treated like we're like so little, like we have like no knowledge of the world at all. And I think teenage is all about that pendulum of going back and forth in time and not really knowing like where you exist on that pendulum, and just like trying to figure out your place. And by the time you figure out your place, I think you're out of teenage by that point. So I think it's like a pretty confusing age. And in terms of like perceiving time, it's also like a season of like impatiently waiting and wandering around without like having the power to actually do anything about it. Like when you're in your like high school years or something, you have those decisions waiting for you around the corner. Like you have to maybe choose your major, choose the college that you want to go in, maybe choose the city that you're going to live in, or make these decisions of what kind of education you want to pursue, or like a certain like there are these certain choices lurking in the future, and like a very near future. And it's not like you can make those decisions right now because you don't have that independence, or you don't have like the power to do that in your present circumstances. Here again, you're like not such a little kid where you like need your parents around all the time, or like the adults in your life around all the time, but you're not even that big that you can be completely taken away from this environment and you'll be like completely good to go. I think it's that transitory period when you're like slowly coming out of the bubble as a kid and then going into your like adult years. That's why this teenage phase feels more of like a pendulum of like a lot of back and forth swing when it comes to like perceiving time. And yeah, I think those are my thoughts about that stage in particular. I am gonna take another brief pause and get a sip of water. And I mean, it won't be like a pause for you because I'll cut it out anyway. But let me get back to you in 2 minutes. All right, we're back to talk about the last stage, which is like the early adulthood years. And well, I am in that phase right now, so I very well can't talk about any experiences beyond this stage, like in your 30s, 40s, and later than that. And I'm sure it gets even more interesting when you get to those ages. But yeah, right now I'm in my mid 20s, and I have been through like the uncertain times of my early 20s and my college years, and getting out of college and the post grad life and the uncertainties that come with that. And let me tell you, I'm sure like if you are already in that stage, you have very well experienced it yourself. But if in case you haven't, the perception of time definitely changes as you're going through these like varied phases in your life. And I think till college also the sense of time is pretty standardized, I would say. Like you're able to see the passage of time in terms of like set like the way that your curriculum or your school year is set. So, and that's like almost the same pattern that you've seen ever since you were a kid. So even though like apart from this school centric, like education centric perception of time, you have like maybe had more of a leisurely pace and you've like not noticed the passage of time, I think after college it gets like even more real. So like till you're in college, you have your time divided into like semesters and the summer holidays, the winter break, and like so on and so forth. And you're able to even like count the steps, like I'm in my first year, I'm in my second year, and like I'm in the last term of my third year, and things are about like things are sort of go in that incremental fashion where you're able to measure the passage of time with certain like maybe qualifications or milestones. However, when you, and I think that also like makes it sort of easier to digest the idea of time and notice the passing of it. But like as soon as you are out of college and on your own path, now there's this another concept that I also like, we all, think about, where it's like you're like going in that herd state till you're in college, and the moment you get out, it's like all of these different paths emerge and everyone takes their own. So I think when you take or like start walking on your own path, like start forming your own path, I think the passage of time gets even like weirder, because now there are like no set phases to sort of notice the passage of time. Maybe you can count it in terms of how many years has it been since you graduated, but that's just like one metric, and it's sort of a nostalgic metric that not everyone will be like, not everyone will prefer to remember it that way. Like when I think about it and I see that it's been 3 years since I graduated, it sort of hits me every time that I realize that. But I don't want to be just noticing the passage of time as in terms of how many years it's been since I graduated, because I think there's more to now in when actually it's been 3 years. Now there are so many other factors or milestones or aspects that I would rather judge the passage of time by. So I think it becomes like even more complex and layered to navigate time as an adult, because now you don't have any set, expectations or any set layout for a year. You can obviously go by like calendar months and things like that, but first of all, I think it takes time to adjust to that. Like when you've been living on such like a semester pattern, which does not like really follow the pattern of the calendar, like your school will start in June, or in India, like your school year will start in June and your semester will be done by I think October, November, depending on, and then the second one will start in December and go on till March or April. So it's clearly not following the set pattern of like January to December. And now when you're suddenly like in your adult years, maybe you're at a job or doing something else, you have to like get adjusted to seeing time pass in terms of like the calendar years. And like that's how, at least that's been like a change for me. Earlier I used to classify time as like which year of college or which standard was I in, like when I was in school. So it would be like, oh, I'm in the ninth standard, or oh, I'm like in my third year of college. That is how I would like classify time and even identify like with in terms of where I am at in life. But now it's not like that anymore. Now it's like I'm in 2024 and now it's August of 2024. So I think there is also this sort of adjustment that happens in post-grad, and that's why I think the passage of time becomes like more nuanced and more complex. And you don't even have like these set milestones, like I said. Like you could maybe be switching jobs every couple of years, or you could be like in the same job for the next 15 years. So like this is not something that you will know unless you've like lived through it. So there are no like upcoming milestones per se for you. I mean, surely there will be some like standard societal milestones, like if you choose to partake in them. Like maybe there will be like marriages or kids in the future for you and your friends, where you'll be able to sort of classify time as per that, as to like oh look, they got married in this year, or it's been like 5 years since they got married or had a kid or something like that. But then again, it's sort of like strewn all over the place, and there's like no set calendar that we now have to follow. And I think because of that, like maybe that's one of the factors that contributes, is that time feels like it's moving like so fast. And that's why I decided to title this episode Timeflation, because I think it's the inflation of time. Like the way that we feel in terms of like economic inflation, that oh my god, like prices are so much higher now, and I used to get this item for so less, and now it's costing so much more. I think it's the same way. Like a year is costing us so much more because it's passing like so quickly. And I'm of course not talking about the literal costs of a year, but like costing us in terms of the time is going by so quickly. So we sort of frantically try to look for how much we've done in the time that has passed, or we sort of try to take stock of the time that has passed. And that's the costing that I'm talking about. And I think the more, like, the older I get, the faster the time even feels. Like in my first year of postgrad, I felt like I'm just out of college. I think I can take my sweet time to explore and find my own path, and just see what fits and like find the right thing for me. So I think till then also time was going by like fairly at a nice pace where I was able to keep up with it. And now then in the second year, like after college, it felt like it was going around like a bit faster. Like I've been at my job for a few months now, and where have these few months flown by? Or when I look at some of my friends like who've maybe moved out or like moved back, and I'm shocked to like see that it's already been so many years since that big change happened in their life. Or like when I look at some of the past milestones, it like surprises me to realize how much time has passed since then. And now I'm like just over 3 years out of college, and I think this year in particular has like flown by at like a crazy speed. And I think that's why I'm realizing that each year it might feel like time is going by even faster. And that's why I think the terminology like timeflation comes to mind when I think about this concept. And that's why I put the whole theory in place, where I said that the speed of time is directly proportional to its length. The more I live through time, the more time I spend on the planet, I think the faster it's gonna go. In my own experience, I would be happy to be proven wrong, and I would love to, go at a more leisurely pace and feel like I have all the time in the world. And which brings me to another concept, that I think time also flows by faster because you realize that you've used up a lot of it and now there's less to be used. Like when I said in the kids phase that we feel like we have all the time in the world, it's because we really do have all the time in the world. And now that we're in like our mid-20s, and let's say we were in the quarter life, so like technically we've lived through maybe a quarter or even like a third of our lives. And it's that of like, oh, we've already used this up and there's only now like lesser left than what was before. So I think it's also that like concept, when we start realizing it, I think it makes us realize how like fast time is going by. And I hope I'm not being like too like philosophical with this, or it's not too like hard to understand. I think this is just something that's been like floating around in my brain for quite a while. Like these topics come out of some like notes, like Google Notes that I keep on my phone, and they've just like been there. Like this particular topic has just been there for a couple of months, so I know that this has been brewing. But like I said, I hadn't really like put together the pieces till I like started filming on my phone and started recording this episode. So I hope that this doesn't like seem too chaotic, but I think these were some of my musings and like thoughts on this concept, on like the passage of time and how I think we live in a world where timeflation exists. And I would love to know what your thoughts are on this topic. And I think I'm gonna like sort of wrap up the episode around this point, because it's maybe like 20, even 30 minutes long. And I think that's the length that I want to stick to for now. I know that podcast episodes are like 45 to 60-minute episodes are like generally the norm maybe, but I want to like start off into like this first season with around 20 to 30 minutes per episode, because I don't think I have a lot of thoughts on like one particular topic like as niche as this, which extend beyond like 30 minutes. So let's, instead of just making it like too rambly and then too irrelevant, let's just stick to what like my brain can come up with in like, and it feels fresh and not something that I'm like regurgitating, or it just doesn't feel like thoughts that I'm ruminating on. So I want to keep it like crisp and fresh. And I know that even these 20-30 minutes will feel like awfully long to some of you who might not even relate to the topic, and I completely understand. But if you do resonate with this topic, or if like time is something that you've been thinking about, I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And if you like these sort of episodes and the other types of videos on my YouTube channel, make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you're notified each time that I upload. I'm trying to be more consistent now with these videos, and for the past month, I have been regularly uploading. So I'm trying to stick to that schedule so that you know when to expect a new video each week. And hopefully, this will work out and you'll be here for the next episode as well. I'll see you then. Bye bye.